As of late, there's a certain clip of Billy Corgan's podcast, The Magnificent Others, circulating the digital airwaves. In it, the Smashing Pumpkins frontman makes the bold claim that in the late 1990s, rock music, instead of naturally losing its status as the dominant youth subculture, was purposely pushed out of the spotlight.
I think, and I will say it overtly, I think that rock has been purposely dialed down in the culture.
When would you say that began? Mid-2000s?
Late 90s.
I'm not as interested in agreeing or disagreeing with Corgan, much less concocting conspiracy theories, as much as I am in just having a dialogue with his statements. In the years following the end of the grunge era, you may say marked by the death of Kurt Cobain in 1994. You may say marked by the release of that era's most ambitious album, the Pumpkins' very own Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness in 1995. There were still plenty of new rock bands making verifiable mainstream success, the White Stripes, the Strokes, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, etc. The influence that the turn of the millennium Brooklyn scene had not only in music, but in areas such as fashion during the 2000s cannot be understated. However, after Arctic Monkeys' AM in 2013, I cannot recall if there has been a rock release that could have been called a mainstream phenomenon. In 2025, there was a lot of buzz around Geese's Getting Killed being the LP that brings the electric guitar back to popular music's forefront. But the authenticity of that buzz is a topic far too complicated to tackle in this essay. If rap music and hip-hop culture were the ones that overtook rock's place in the heart of the youth, there are still some things that ought to be questioned. After the deaths of Tupac in 1996 and Biggie in 1997, it isn't hard to notice that the culture, not so much the underground that birthed it, but the mainstream that captured it, lost its focus on lyrical virtuosity, sonic innovation, and black consciousness to material wealth, promiscuity, and the glorifying of street violence. In the same way the raucous energy of grunge was pasteurized into post-grunge, the stylish transgression of acts such as A Tribe Called Quest and Wu-Tang Clan was sidelined by the Bling era. But after Kendrick Lamar's historical victory in his beef against Drake, as cemented by the multi-platinum success and Grammy Song of the Year award win of They Not Like Us in 2024, there hasn't really been another rap song with even 10% of its ubiquity. Just a few years ago, hip-hop and R&B had overtaken all other genres in the Billboard charts. Since the leaving of Kendrick and SZA's Luther from those same charts in October 25, 2025, there hasn't been a single song of the so-called urban genres in it. For white female singers, arguably the most representative figures of pop music and public consciousness, nothing seems to have changed substantially. Even when there was competition from counterculture born acts, the Madonnas, Britneys, and Taylors of the musical landscape always had their place in the sun pretty much guaranteed. Now that artists like these don't have to compete in the attention economy with, let's say, an Aphex Twin, an Outkast, or even a Smashing Pumpkins, you may ask yourself, what's next? The truth of the matter is that, although there may not ever be another instance of something like grunge, punk, or even rave culture invading the mainstream ever again, there will still be plenty of phenomena bubbling under the surface that, even if it never crosses over into mass consciousness, are still quite telling of current Western culture. If I was in the room with Corgan when that somewhat viral clip was shot, I'll just ask him a question. If rock has really been pushed out of the mainstream, why are Generation Z's favorite bands Deftones and Radiohead? In June of 2025, 20 years after its release, OK Computer non-single Letdown entered the US bubbling under Hot 100 and Hot Rock and Alternative Songs charts. Likewise, in 2024, Saturday Night Wrist's non-single Cherry Waves went platinum 18 years after its debut. In a similar vein, bands such as My Bloody Valentine and Slowdive are more popular now than they were in the days they were passively aggressively dubbed as part of the scene that celebrates itself by music journalists. What's the unifying reason for all of these sudden successes? Can they be compared to, for example, what happened to Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill after its usage in Stranger Things? No. For these newfound successes, you can thank Zoomers on TikTok. If video killed the radio star, you could easily argue that the internet killed the video star and, later, TikTok killed every other website stars. For each generation, there is their own mass diffusion platform. The Ed Sullivan Show consolidated Beatlemania as the dominant cultural phenomenon for boomers in the 60s. For Gen X, it was MTV's non-stop airing of the Smells Like Teen Spirit's music video that crowned Kurt Cobain as the antenna of its race. Millennials had MySpace, in which artists like Tyler the Creator and bands like Tame Impala came up from. Zoomers now have TikTok, a platform in which bat-of-an-eye immediacy has absolute primacy, catapulting artists like Charlie XCX, maybe the closest thing that the mainstream has to a countercultural icon, her being the biggest torchbearer for hyperpop at the top of the industry. With the advent of the internet, the locus of many music-centric countercultures has shifted from the local to the digital sphere. For such scenes, the relevance of physical things such as live venues and mixtapes has been seconded by digital means of reproduction such as short-form content and memes. Time as perceived in the HTTPS age is exponentially faster than it was in the analog days. Aesthetics such as vaporwave, C-punk, and hyperpop seem to pop up as fast as they fade away. And although initially it seemed like the most democratic of platforms, as it became colder, more pervasive in everyday life, and more capital-driven, the internet took the role of the bureaucratic middleman sat between the record company boardroom and the freak scene, influencing it in invisible ways before it even establishes its aesthetics and values. If you ever asked yourself, what happened to the Cobains of the world, or why is our culture so flat nowadays? This may be the answer. As soon as something at least apparently new pops up and gets enough attention, it's swallowed whole by the machine. As soon as it fizzles out, it's on to the next thing ad nauseum ad infinitum. Returning to why Deftones and Radiohead have found so much resonance with Generation Z, I think it's clear that, although music and mass media has changed so much and yet stay the same, some things are truly perennial. The youth wants representatives of their own pains and ideals through sound. During the civil rights era, the black community of the US found its collective voice in Nina Simone's, as she put her own career and well-being on the line by belting out, "Everybody knows about Alabama, everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn." Under Thatcher, the British working class found theirs in the Smiths' tales about a jumped-up pantry boy who never knew his place in this charming man. And although artists such as Taylor Swift and Sabrina Carpenter stand as the most streamed and as the biggest ticket sellers of the 2020s, it's hard to imagine that they represent much more than white female romantic frustrations and lust. In a mainstream cultural landscape mostly unmoored by countercultural undercurrents, the recuperation of 1990s alternative rock by Gen Z might be their way of signaling, even if unconsciously, some internal and external frustrations. But besides the categorization as the generation bar between 1997 and 2012, it's hard to know if there can be a genuine consensus about the world's second youngest generation. You could say they're responsible, mild-mannered people. You could also say that they have no financial responsibility whatsoever. You could argue that their cognitive skills are going up in some areas and down in others. whether taking too long to become adults, or whether under too much pressure to adult, whether the most progressive generation alive or the most reactionary, whether this left-wing, right-wing divide is actually a war of sexes or one between younger and older cohorts of a same generation. But one thing is undeniable, they're not happy. At all. Blame the housing market, blame social media, or the worsening of the world at large. Gen Z might have given the world many pieces of slang such as mid, breeze, and unk, but one word's absence from their vocabulary is felt deeper than most words' presence: hope. Every year is warmer than the previous one. The gap between the rich and the poor only increases. Progressivism and conservatism resemble cults of madness more and more with each and every day. AI is likely to abolish the white-collar job and, with it, the idea of a middle class at last. Most importantly, a couple of are bringing us closer than ever to nuclear annihilation. To paraphrase Leonard Cohen, get ready for the present, it is murder. Going back to why Gen Z is enamored with alt bands from the 90s, Deftones and Radiohead in particular, I could end this essay right here by saying that Gen Z is sad and hopeless, so is the sound of these bands. Since nothing in the mainstream sounds like them, the younger generation are going back to the music of their Gen X parents for solace. We can all go home and cry ourselves to sleep to motion picture soundtrack and anniversary of an uninteresting event now. One of my all-time favorite Miles Davis moments is an interview in which he recalls his time at Juilliard. During a class, one of his white teachers stated that the way the blues sounds is a manifestation of the legacy of slavery upon the souls of black folk. Miles immediately stood up, said that's bullshit, and, word on the street, left the room to never come back. The rest, as they say, is history.
So then they say that's where the blues came from. So I raised my hand. I said, listen, my father's rich, my mom is good looking, right? And I can play the blues. I never suffered and don't intend to suffer.
In the same way, the full repentance of white progressives reduces black creativity to a mere reflex of their own ancestors' crimes, a thinly veiled form of pride masking as shame, downplaying the greatness of a Miles, a Toni Morrison, or a Richard Pryor as products of centuries of oppression. If I were to follow that same line of thought, I could say that the brilliance of bands such as Alice in Chains or My Bloody Valentine come from them being the expression of downwardly mobile white middle-class ennui, and that Gen Z only like these bands because of how much it feels like a mirror to their own misery. Needless to say, with this paternalistic, pretensely social and politically conscious form of commentary should be combated by any means necessary. In a style akin to my 5-song series, we will now analyze the two previously mentioned Radiohead and Deftones album cuts, Let Down and Cherry Waves, that, through TikTok, Gen Z has brought to the charts. What I'm interested in is not answering indefinite, but merely trying to better understand where this generation's love for these songs might be coming from. Is it just plain old escapism, a sort of protest, or something entirely different? As I previously discussed in the Deftones edition of 5 Songs, the recording of 2006's Saturday Night Wrist, due to issues regarding some of its members' marriages and substance abuse, was not an easy period for the band. As Chino himself admitted in an interview for Kerrang! In September of 2006, it was the hardest record I've ever made in my life. In fact, it may even be the hardest thing I ever done in my life. Nothing was working out. I wasn't very excited about it, and I don't think anyone else was. I had to step away from the Deftones to look at things in a different light, which is why Team Sleep happened. The others didn't like that. It was pretty much the end of the Deftones.
Here's the songwriting process of the band. Hey, what are you doing? Why don't you mind your own fucking business? No, what are you doing right there? Hey, I got a great idea. Why don't you play this? Hey, fuck off, I'm the drummer. Do I tell you how to play guitar? Yeah, whatever. Hey, are you gonna sing at all, or are you just gonna fucking fool around on the guitar? Hey, fuck you, what are you doing? That's pretty much the song, right? And then someone leaves.
You hear this dissolution of interpersonal bonds in Chino's I Hate All My Friends, they all lack taste sometimes, in Hole in the Earth, and in the foreboding tones of Beware. The next couple of years would also prove to be difficult for the band, as the recording of Eros was upended due to Chi Cheng's car accident and ensuing coma. Although it was the decade that the Tones gave the world White Pony, it's no wonder the 2000s is regarded as the band's darkest hours. And yet, in SNW, there is one song that, even if in a rather cautious manner, represents some sliver of luminescence invading the fissures of the band's members' professional and personal lives: Cherry Waves. With lines such as, "A sea of waves, we hug the same plank, just as I would rehearse over in my brain," and "The waves suck you in and you drown, I'll swim down, would you?" There isn't much mystery about the song's lyrics. As Moreno himself stated in that same Kerrang interview, Cherry Waves is a song about trust, and if I could dare to add, the fear of it being a scarce resource, whether it was in his own then failing first marriage or between him and his bandmates around that same period. It's totally plausible that the reality of an unproven love, symbolized by a plank floating in the seas, over the imaginative sonic patisserie of soft dream pop verses featuring one of Chi Cheng's finest bass lines, with crunchy shoegaze choruses containing what may be Chino's most beautiful vocal melody to date, is what captivated Gen Z. You may be asking, well, couldn't it captivate any generation? And to that I'd say yes. But what makes the relationship between Zoomers and the Tones interesting is how, only at surface level, contradictory it seems. Why is the most sexless generation in love with what is considered by many the sexiest metal band? For Zoomers of many nations, love, sex, and intimacy are presented as a sort of double-edged sword. With the advent of the internet after the sexual revolution, it's easier to know one's hyper-specific proclivities than it has ever been, to see them taken to its ends in high fidelity, to touch the innards of one's own eros at a distance. Meaning the flash form of the idealized JPEG and MP4 forms of the desired one, I'm afraid, is often the subject of much disappointment. And as previously stated, the male-to-female relationship has never been as tenuous as it is today, with movements like MTAO and South Korea's 4B pushing, each in its own way, the idea that heterosexuality is nothing but a game in which only one can win. You either hack it or quit it. No one knows for certain if the one they long for is willing to, as Chino put it, swim if they drown when life calls for it. But nonetheless, we all long for a fellow deep-sea diver to come along, for depths that won't feel like a death spiral, but an ascension to the heavens, like the way Cherry Waves sounds. Transport, motorways and tram lines, starting and then stopping, taking off and landing, the emptiest of feelings, disappointed people, clinging onto bottles, and when it comes, it's so disappointing. Once again, this essay could end right here. I could talk about how brilliant the song's marriage between the guitar jangling of the Smiths and Steve Reich's phasing technique is. In fact, its complexity made Radiohead leave it out of their live set for 2006 Spring Rainbows tour notwithstanding, damn near 20 years. I could take excerpts from interviews given by Tom and Johnny that will just reconfirm what the lyrics are already saying. Regardless of the approach, the final result would be, as we'd seen it in Brazil, chovendo no molhado, Maybe I should have taken the easy way out. Maybe Gen Z is just a generation of hopeless people that want the right soundtrack to mope about for miserable days as they wait for the sweet kiss of death, a kiss they might give to themselves. But is it so? If you want to rekindle your love for humanity, go on YouTube, type Radiohead Letdown, press enter, click the video with just over 100 million views and scroll the comment section. There'll be stories of people surviving overcoming drug addiction, alcoholism, self-harm, even cancer. You may ask yourself, why are all these people rallying around such a melancholic tune instead of, let's say, don't worry, be happy? I believe poet, essayist, dancer, and fellow Substack user Harmony Holiday once said that the blues is not about being sad, but rather about getting happy. Miles played it better than most and, for reasons quoted from Porgy and Bess's Summertime, never suffered. If alternative music is, in a rather reductive way, the white middle class equivalent of a black American musical format, maybe it's time we rethink our idea of a so-called sad song and its uses. Tom York once said that if people stopped listening to sad music, that would not be a good sign. If I could make a contribution to his statement, I would say that the foregoing of sad songs isn't a sign of a happy, healthy culture, but one in which the masses are thoroughly lobotomized out of their own thoughts and emotions. The most refined of all authoritarian states, a braver, newer world. Knowing that there are teenagers and fellow 20-somethings interested in music that gives voice to their voiceless emotions gives me hope. In times of mass annihilation of the self, the fruit of extreme material and informational consumption and the outsourcing of thought to machines, to be attuned to oneself is a small form of protest. I'm not going to make some grand statement that music is a tool for revolutionary change or anything of the kind. That's something I have my doubts about. But I do believe that, just like any art form, music is a survival tool, a meaning-making machine in a meaningless world. If that isn't already a type of resistance, I don't know what it is. Sure, TikTok being TikTok, the phenomenon of Gen Z adopting 90s alt rock as disseminated and documented through it isn't without its cringe-worthy moments. For example, although he was humored by discovering its existence, Chino Moreno has rejected the baddiecore label some of the newer fans of his band have applied to Deftones. Is Radiohead just about wallowing in postmodern alienation, or is it about anything more, as Tom sings, as my world comes crashing down, I'll be dancing, freaking out, deaf, dumb and blind, in present tense? Is Deftones just about lusting and longing when Chino sings, I finally achieved balance, approaching a delayed rebirth, and Genesis? Can any of the greats be reduced to a mere hashtag, or can they be appreciated at many different levels? But still, what makes me even happier is that Gen Z's recuperation of shoegaze, grunge, and other forms of 90s alternative rock does not die with TikTok trends, but rather that it's been translated through a whole new wave of bands and artists inspired by that era. Although they're composed of younger millennials, Death Heaven and Loathe stand as some of my favorites, bridging the gap between the ethereal sounds of shoegaze with the brutality of extreme metal. Yes, you can like Slowdive as much as you like Slayer, and if you're enough of a tasteful ingenue, you can combine them into something new. Although I think there is still plenty of new interesting stuff happening in the scene, there is one thing that shall be avoided at all costs: nostalgic backsliding. I don't need to tell you that the world is in an utterly hopeless state right now. Mainstream culture and the arts being but a reflection of that hopelessness. It's easy to romanticize a time when the underground could break into the mainstream with such apparent ease, but let me tell you this. For every Nirvana, there was 100 bands from that same Seattle scene we came from whose members had to hold full-time regular jobs just to make ends meet. You may not know about Bam Bam, you may not know about the Fastbacks, you may not know about Skinyard, but Kurt knew about them. Some even say he was a roadie for the first of these bands. Even for the bands that did make it, whenever they wanted to break away from the boxes the industry trapped them into, it was war. Let's wind the clock back to the turn of the millennium, the year of Kid A and White Pony. And Voodoo, Mama's Gun, Stories from the City, Stankonia, Lift Your Skinny Fists. You see, not even I am immune to nostalgia. But you think the people at Capitol Records were ready to hear everything in its right place? You think the people at Maverick Records, and yes, that may include Madonna, were ready to hear Knife Party?
And they're expecting, like, guitars. And so, the first song, Everything's the Right Place, not a guitar. The second song, Kid A, not a guitar. The third song, National Anthem, not a guitar. And they're literally sweating,
I won't go on a huge diatribe about how to build a sustainable underground music culture, the politics, logistics, and ethics of it, but for the sake of my argument, I would like to hypothesize about one. I firmly believe that for anything to be sincerely called alternative, and therefore resistant to co-optation by mainstream capitalist forces, it should represent some type of opposition to what's in vogue. Nostalgia has been a hot commodity in the cultural industries for a long time, but seems even more so as of late. To help build the ethos of this hypothetical scene, why not take a page from Swedish painter Odd Nerdrum, move backwards into the future so that your face is illuminated by the past. Study the classics, take notes from them, improve your technique, but never delude yourself into believing you can bring X, Y, or Z back. And yes, I know that good musical instruments, like anything else, are not cheap these days. Yes, I know free time is an increasingly rare commodity. And yes, I know we all could be rushing to the nearest nuclear bunker, if not outright obliterated, anytime soon. Why the hell would you think about making music in times like these? Well, just go back to the third and last Yes I Know. If you really love bands like Deftones and Radiohead and ever thought, I wish I could do what they did, if you hear yourself loud enough, like the music of these bands made you realize it's possible, it will be impossible to hide from the calling. At the end of the day, you may not make it big like the Oxford band and the Sacramento band did, but very few things can bring joy to one's life like the act of creation. It starts with a cheap guitar and a crappy amp, with poorly barred chords, out-of-key vocals and cringy lyrics. But start it must. You hear this dissolution of interpersonal bonds in Chino's I hate all my friends, they all lactate sometimes. In the... oh, que jeito eu falei, velho. Lactate.